Hi, this is Tammy. I do math for coffee. We are continuing with our geometry class. We're going to talk about segment bisectors today. In biology class, have you ever dissected a frog? Dissecting means to cut it up into pieces. So bisecting means to cut it up into two pieces. But they are equal pieces. Two equal pieces. The bisector is the thing that does that. So it can be a point it can be a point, it can be a line, it can be a ray, it can be a segment, anything that takes another segment and cuts it in half. And again, this needs to be a segment, not a line, because lines go forever in two directions. You can't really cut them in half. Ooh, nope, segment. I drew what I was saying. Okay, so if you have a segment and there's a point in the middle, they usually will label it something like M, but in this case, I'm going to draw a line that goes through it like that. It doesn't have to be straight, doesn't have to be perpendicular. That's what I'm saying. You probably expected me to go straight up and down. That's called a perpendicular bisector. We'll talk about those another time. But anything that would cut this thing in half, you notice I didn't measure it, I just put two congruent marks on it. This half is equal to that half. So if you, for instance, had something and it wasn't in the middle, put a point there, you could put one mark on here, but a little two hashes here. This would be not congruent segments. All right, so this is a segment bisector. We're going to do a bunch of problems with this. The notes on this are pretty easy, but the problems can be really difficult. This one is almost like a true and false question. Is M the midpoint of AB? Well, they're telling you that the whole length of it is 35. And they're telling you that this piece is 15. So you just pretty much need to figure out what this piece is. If it's a midpoint, then this would be 15 too. And somebody in their head is doing it right now, and I get it. But just in case you're not following, I'm going to show you the math. I don't know what that is. I take 35, subtract 15, and I get 20, which means this piece is 20, and 20 and 15 don't equal. So the answer is no. This is not a midpoint. Looks like it is. You can't go by that. The diagrams are all going to look lovely and wonderful. Everything's going to look great, but you can't assume it unless you're told. M is the midpoint of CE. They are straight up telling us that that is true right now, and you are supposed to solve for X. If you want to try to do this on your own, pause. Otherwise, I'm moving forward for the solution. If it is a midpoint, it means that the two pieces are equal to each other. So I'm just going to set up the equation. 77 equals 7 plus 5x. I subtracted 7 from both sides. I did it in my head. I get 70 equals 5x. Divide both sides by 5. X equals 14. G is the midpoint of FH. So that means these two pieces are equal to each other, and we set that up and we're going to solve. Once you have the equation set up, that's the end of the geometry. Then it becomes a matter of knowing how to do the algebra. In this case, it's a variable on both sides. The way I like to do these is I like to subtract the smaller variable from the larger one. So I'm going to take 4x away from both sides. When I do that, I end up with 8x minus 4x is 4x, minus 15 comes down, equals, these two are going to cancel out, and you're just left with the minus 3 on this side. Add 15 to both sides now, and we get negative 3 plus 15 is 12, 4x equals 12, x equals 3. This one's a little tricky, but if you think you can do it, pause and give it a go. K is the midpoint of JL. You have to be told that. So once we know that these two pieces are equal to each other. And the whole thing now is 12 plus 8x. There's probably more than one way to do this. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to try to point out the obvious. This side is congruent to this side, which means I can say that both of these two things are the same size, and when you add them together, they're going to equal this. So I'm just going to copy 8 plus 3x over here again. I have two of the same thing, so I'm going to just write it as 2 times 8 plus 3x equals 12 plus 8x. This is distributive property, so we have to multiply that 2 through. We get 16 plus 6x. 2 times 8 is the 16. 2 times 3x is 6x. I didn't do anything on this side, so I just copied it down. Now, my preference when I have variables on both sides of an equation is to subtract the smaller one from the larger one. So I'm going to end up with, this is going to cancel, so just the 16 is left on this side. So I end up with 16 equals 12 plus 8x minus 6x is 2x. Take the 12 away from both sides, and we end up with 4 equals 2x, and we get x equals 2. This one, where it doesn't seem like they're giving you enough information, is one of the problems that stump people quite a bit. So I wanted to make sure you got one of those in your lesson. There is something called the midpoint formula that we use with coordinates on a grid, like an XY grid. I'm making that a separate lesson. When it's done, I'll put a link here. You can click into that and watch that next. If you are just jumping into our geometry class right now, I'm going to put a link here for the entire playlist. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys soon.